Now, there is something also called, this is in between legislative sessions, I just wanted to briefly mention this. There's something called interim committees. Interim obviously means between sessions. In Texas, we only have our legislature. It's not a full-time legislature. It meets every 2 years, and they're odd number years. So we had them in 2007, 2009, now 2011. Okay, so in between that time, again, the speaker and the lieutenant governor come very much into play here, where they can assign committees to study specific issues. They call them interim charges. And often they're hot button issues like voter ID or immigration. In our case in transportation, they've studied these foreign owned toll roads and things like that they know are pretty controversial. And what happens is they file reports. They call in a bunch of experts for testimony, and they supposedly study the issue and talk about how it might impact the taxpayers or local government or something like that. And so these studies, what comes out the other end is it's a recommendation to the legislature, and it almost always results in some kind of piece of legislation. So it's important to stay involved even in the interim, which is what we've been doing, so you can get your official opinions on the record so that they kind of have a feel of, is this going to be controversial? Because remember, if it's controversial, it doesn't go on the uncontested calendar. And it's going to be a much harder hurdle for them to get through to get their bill passed. We have to be involved in that. That's how we can shape legislation. So citizen involvement is important there too. Then there's these nifty things called the rules. Okay, the Texas House and the Senate both adopt rules of how they govern the process. Things like points of privilege, and you know, the actual how the debate happens on the floor, how different things navigate through the process. So for instance, the Senate rules, they just adopted them yesterday, do require still a 2/3 majority to take up or debate any bill on the general calendar. In other words, bills that are not on the local and uncontested calendar. This is just the general calendar that relates to. Then they proceed, after all these rules are made, it hits about early to mid-May, and suddenly they habitually vote to suspend the rules. They do things like suspend the rule for third reading. So now you have no opportunity to have a second view of something. Because remember, on the second reading, which is when they pass it through the first time, after the first floor vote, they can amend a bill. And if you're in the gallery, you're just a Joe Blow Schmo taxpayer, you're not a lobbyist or anybody who has access to the actual amendments that are being offered, because most of the time they're not made public. That's how they completely will change the face of an entire piece of legislation, just like that, by amending a bill. So a lot of times that's the protection for the taxpayer, is between second and third reading we can find out what they did to the bill to know if we want to rally the troops to kill the bill or keep the bill. So this second and third reading thing is very important. It's for our benefit. And when they suspend the rules to skip the third reading, that means all that takes is one vote, and if they, meaning one floor vote, and if they amend it to something that's very anti-taxpayer, there's really no way to stop it. Unless you can try and stop it at final passage if there's some changes in the bills and it goes to conference committee. But not all bills do that.
Sometimes they can find points of order.
Yes, there's ways like that, exactly. If you can master the rules, that's what I'm saying here. If you can become a master at understanding the rules, it can help us outmaneuver the bad guys. So anyway, but those are some things we could use some help on. If you're a researcher and you like to get into the nitty-gritty like that, those are some things that we can suggest. Because especially some of the freshman lawmakers, they're like us, they don't necessarily know all the details, even though they've had some like freshman training and all. There's some really experienced legislators in there that know exactly how to kill a bill with a point of order. So there's ways you can do it procedurally as well. Okay, so here's how you follow bills and hopefully get them passed. The first thing you have to do is follow the committees. The absolute key, again, is to go to Texas Legislature Online and sign up for something called Bill Alerts. But really the easiest way to get to the Texas Legislature Online is to do a Google search. Just put in Texas Legislature Online and it will come up, because it's government gobbledygook to try and find it any other way. But this is the home page, and this basically has just about everything that the grassroots needs to know how to follow a bill. One of the first things you're going to want to do is sign up for Bill Alerts. Where do we have it? Here we go. How to follow a bill. So you can go here and do it. You can also do it under these additional searches that are in this middle section here. Then it tells you how to find all this stuff: bill search, bill list. You can create a personal bill list and receive an email notification as to the status of changes on bills you choose to watch. And if you just kind of go in, and let's just practice for a minute. Okay, so you can add a bill number. Let's just say SB 18. That's the eminent domain bill, okay? And and then it says any category. Now this means what action do you want to be notified about? I say all of them. I want to know if it's if the governor's taken action, if it's been filed, if it's been scheduled for a hearing, all these things. You want to know when your bill's moving or anything changes on a bill. So I just leave it any category. And then you come over here. Do you see where my little guy is? Over here to add bill. So we're going to add the bill. And now that means I will get email notifications of any movement on that bill throughout the entire process, including when a committee report's filed, when it comes up for floor votes, all those sorts of things, so that you can know that. Now, it does not follow. You at least can find out the hearings when it's being heard, and you can get the text of the bill and all those types of changes. What you can't get on Texas Legislature Online very well is once they've gotten it to the point. It's kind of the nuanced stuff that happens in between all the official stages of a bill. They don't have those sorts of things on here. All right, so you go to Texas Legislature Online, you sign up for your bill alerts, and here's what I wanted to go through first before I get into the technical stuff. Okay, so if a bill gets heard, it's moving. It's now officially moving. There's a lot of people who file bills. A lot of times politicians like to file it to say that they filed it, not to actually get it passed. Senator Jeff Wentworth is pretty typical of doing that. So if a bill gets heard, it's moving. So that means it's in danger of becoming law if it's a bad bill, or if it's a good bill, that's great that it's moving. So you have to get it heard. Now, I don't know if people know this. If you have someone that says they're going to file a bill for us, let's say, and they file it, you have to hold their feet to the fire because they have to request a hearing. Their bill's not going to get heard if they don't make a request for a hearing. So again, if like let's say at election time, you hear someone say, oh, I filed a bill to repeal the Trans-Texas Corridor. Well, guess what? We caught a guy doing that last session and was running for re-election in November, and we found and looked it up. He never even requested a hearing for that bill. So you're not really trying hard if you don't request a hearing. Then it's very important that we have testimony against the bad bills or in support of the good bills, and so we can rally the grassroots to try and kill it or to support the bill. And you have to try and garner the votes to get it out of committee and to a floor vote. Which, let's see, on the Senate there's maybe, 7 members maybe, and then I think there's 9 members of the Transportation Committee on the House side. I have to go look it up. But okay, so if you can't get a good bill out of committee, it's not the end of the world. This happened last session again. They did not ever get the Trans-Texas Corridor repeal out of committee. They wouldn't put our other bill about accountability at MPOs, making them elected, wouldn't let that out of committee. They also wouldn't let fixing the loopholes and the bill that was preventing them from converting our existing freeways into toll roads. They wouldn't let that out of committee. So there's other ways you can do it. If there's another bill that's relevant, now there's a caption to a bill. It might say relating to toll projects or relating to the authorities of regional mobility authorities or relating to comprehensive development agreements. It has some kind of title, a caption. You can also have your bill tacked onto a relevant bill as an amendment. You don't have to have it go through this committee process in order to get something to become law. Then the second thing you have to follow in legislation, again, is the calendars. Remember, the calendars are key. You can get it out of committee, but it can be killed in calendars. So the calendars, committee chairs have not been announced yet in the House. I believe that they might have done, I know they did a shakeup in the Senate. I don't know who the calendars chairman is now. They call it the Committee on Administration. The chair of that in the Senate is who's going to determine the calendar for the Senate. So testimony against bills in the Senate, if you are against a bill, that will likely knock them off of the local uncontested calendar. So you have a better chance of killing the bill if you show up to oppose a bill. If you miss that opportunity, it's like toast because it's going to fly through the Senate if you don't get there to be physically present when the testimony is called. So it's very key to be testifying for these bills. Then it only takes one senator. Let's say that something gets put on the local uncontested calendar. This has happened to me before. Sometimes they have their hearings start at 7:30 in the morning, even getting up at 4 in the morning. Sometimes the traffic's so bad you still can't get there by 7:30. They always call the most controversial bills first so that they know we aren't there to oppose them. Funny how that happens. So anyway, then if it gets on the local uncontested calendar because there's been no opposition to the bill in committee, all it takes is one senator to knock it off the local uncontested calendar. And they can do it anonymously. So all it needs is one senator to knock it off of there. And then it's a much harder process because you have to have 2/3 vote to bring up that bill on the general calendar. So that's why controversy is important, folks. Even though we feel like we're not necessarily as effective as we want to be, believe me, you can be very effective with some of these techniques. Okay, then you want to follow the floor debate very closely. You want to watch for unfriendly amendments and review the bill in the journal. That's why it's important to have time between the second and third reading. This is how you find out what they did to a bill and how they amended it. And we can possibly change or fix the bill. If there's something we don't like in it, we can amend it and change it in the third reading before final passage. Or you can advocate that you just kill the bill altogether if it doesn't, if they don't change the bill with an amendment. But just to reiterate, they don't want our input. The legislative process is totally rigged against the citizen, against transparency, and against our input. Here's a couple of ways that they rig the process. They have something called a committee substitute. So let's say we're going to go out in a minute and look at some sample bills and how you navigate the Texas legislature website some more. But let's say you know your bill already got heard, or you know that it's on the schedule to be heard. They give a notice of public hearing for the Senate and House Transportation Committees generally 72 hours before the meeting happens. So we get to review all the bills. Sometimes there's 50 bills that you have to review in just 72 hours. You have to read them all in order to know what you're going to testify on. So I get there, I've got all my comments prepared for all these bills. Well, the senator gets up, or the representative gets up and says, I'm putting forward a committee substitute. Now they've just changed the entire bill on the fly. There's no public notice, there's no transparency, you don't know what it says. So now you can testify based on what the first bill said, but now if you don't have the committee substitute in hand, and if you're a speed reader, because some of these bills are rather long, you basically are testifying and have no clue what they just did to the bill. So committee substitutes are extremely, extremely dicey. They're very dangerous for the taxpayer because it is like so routine. Those of you who've been up to Austin with me, you know this. Almost every bill that they call for hearing is a committee substitute. They make changes. And unless you're friends with a staffer who might give you a bill in advance because they know a committee substitute's coming, you have no way. You are completely in the dark of having meaningful testimony on that bill. So that's one of the tricks. Here's the second one. You cannot testify for or against a bill unless you are physically present in Austin at the time the bill is called. Now, what are the chances that 25 million Texans? Is that right? I think we have 25 million of us. How many of our 25 million can be in Austin, take the day off work, just sit there all day long, wait for 50 bills to be heard in committee, and then, oh, here comes my bill. Get up there and now we can talk, and half the time it's a committee substitute and you don't know what you're saying anyway. So anyway, it's tough. It's tough to do this, and it is absolutely set up against the citizen. They don't want you there. They don't want your input, and you cannot have any testimony for or against a bill unless you are physically present. Only physical testimony works. Now, sometimes you can do something if it's the day that your bill's on the hearing list. Like, I've had to do this. I've had to run between committee rooms because sometimes State Affairs has a bill that we're interested in, not just transportation. There's lots of ways that they can do toll stuff without just being transportation. So I can't be in two places at once, and a lot of lobbyists are in the same boat, even though I'm not a lobbyist. And so you can put written comments in. As long as it's on the docket for that day, you can put written comments in before they actually call the bill. But you have to physically be present there. You can't even have somebody else turn in your comments. You have to be there, and you have to sign a witness affirmation form that you are the person doing it, or they can nail you with some illegal something. You've done something illegal if you've done that because you misrepresented yourself.
Who have tried to change these procedures in the past?
Oh, I've heard lots of them say that it all drives them crazy. They all say that they don't like the process, but yet they all benefit from it in some way. So they don't really do much to change the process. But this is what happens. And so I would love to work with the Government Reform Committee if we ever had time, because we're always trying to fight all the bad stuff. We don't have time for the actual reform bills. The Government Reform Committee should handle this. You should be able to have emails, faxes, and phone calls, be able to register through a witness affirmation form. You're still swearing that you are telling the truth and that you are the person you say you are. There's ways they can do it and not have it be fraudulent or what have you. There's ways that you can do it to get your testimony in for a bill without having to have someone from Lubbock drive all the way down to Austin and sit around all day. And then what happens? This happens all the time. Oh, they don't get you your bill that day. Come back next week, Ms. Hall. Okay, so then who has time for that? You've already rearranged your whole life just to be there for the one time. Now you've got to do it twice, sometimes 2 or 3 times before they actually get to your bill. So again, it's not set up for citizen input.